Not to say that I didn't love them
Mm-hmm.
or enjoy moments with them.
Yeah.
But there was a real like resentment and regret and grief.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining me. My name is Reesa and I'm your host. We are talking to real families about real stories here on The Real Family Eats, where we've got food for thought and thoughtful food. So let's eat. Hey everyone. Okay, so my guest today is Megan. Hi Megan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to hear about your story. We've got a very special story for everyone, and also to learn about this recipe. I have not tried this one, so I'm super excited. But before we do this, for anybody who doesn't know you, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. So my name is Megan Cordaro. I am a mom to 5 kiddos, ages 19, 17, 13, and 10. As they,
you know, how to remember them all.
Yeah, you know how some kids live in your mind as like one age, and it takes a while to jump to the next. So I really have to think about that. And I am currently working as a birth and postpartum doula, a parent counselor, and I run support groups down at Rock Rose Waldorf School.
Wonderful. So for anybody who is looking for some of those support services that it sounds like you are providing our community, which is so needed and so exciting, how can anybody find you?
My website, www.megancordaro.com. I'm sure that you'll put it.
They will. Yeah. It will be underneath, hopefully in this banner that's right about here. And we'll link it in our show notes as well for anybody who's looking for some of those support services.
Great. And I do parent like counseling and coaching outside of the school too. So I run other parent groups that would be accessible on my website.
Wonderful. That's so awesome. Okay. So tell me what recipe we're making today and why did you choose this one?
Okay. So this is the most basic recipe, but I chose it because it's so easy and it's like, I would always just have all of the ingredients in my fridge.
Okay.
So this was one of those like, oh crap, I don't know what I'm making for dinners, which when the kids are little happened a lot. And luckily this was one of those things that the kids always ate.
Like, really? Okay.
They were never like, oh, we have to have that again. Like everybody always was like, oh yay, harvest grains.
Yeah.
So it's very easy. It's not fancy at all, but I knew that this is one of my recipes that I share with a lot of my families because it's so easy.
Yeah, and it sounds like super nutritious stuff. Just, you know, make sure their bellies are full, which as you mentioned, especially in that kind of survival stage of parenting, that's kind of what you need. You just need something, like you said, I can put it on. I already have kind of all the ingredients. I'm not having to go out and make an extra trip, especially with a full load of kids. You know, that's a task in itself.
It's a lot. And my husband's a firefighter.
Okay.
So he was gone a lot. So sometimes he'd be gone for like 3 or 4 days at a time. So it was like, this was the easy, like this was literally once a week. This would be made.
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. So, if you could tell me kind of the steps, what are we going to be doing? I can get things started while we chat a little bit about your story.
Sure. It's very easy. Heat up the chicken broth.
Okay.
And I put a little bit of butter in there as well, just for flavor, make it like a little bit more richer. You could put another type of oil in too if you're dairy free. The other thing about this recipe that's great is you can do a lot of different things with it. You could do vegetable broth instead of chicken broth.
Okay.
Some kind of oil, like if you're vegetarian. At different stages when I was pregnant, I often gave up dairy.
Okay.
And I was messed with this a lot and it was always still really good. So you're going to heat the chicken broth, put some sort of oil or something else in there.
Okay.
And then once all that comes to a boil, you put in the serving of harvest grains with the vegetables. Another great thing, you put whatever vegetables you have on hand.
Okay.
My favorites were always like corn and peas and broccoli, but like if I had frozen green beans or like whatever frozen vegetable I had, or like, you know, half the bag, I hadn't used it or something, I would just throw that in.
Perfect.
And then it all just cooks.
Okay.
Until it's done.
Okay. I can do that.
We look towards the end of when it says it's going to be done. I think it's like 10 minutes. I just kind of keep checking because the veggies do make it a little bit more liquidy.
Okay.
So sometimes we need to cook it a little bit longer, but we check often because the bottom does burn.
Okay.
Quite quickly.
Good to know.
Which is also fine.
Yeah.
Because then the bottom is just discarded and the rest of it's still good.
There
Another
you go.
reason this was a very good and easy recipe.
Yeah, or you get it a little crispy, it's just
some
crunch.
The crispy bits. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, so I'll get this stuff going, and I'll make sure to get it to that boil, and then we'll get going.
Cool.
I know one of the things that we wanted to chat about, I specifically asked if you could chat about, was the fact that you have a little bit of a unique kind of outside parenting journey, especially with your first kiddos. Mm-hmm. And that's something, even though it's unique in the sense that it's not a widely publicized kind of everyone has the same journey. It's one that actually a lot of my parents relate to. Mm-hmm. And so I would love for you to kind of chat a little bit. Can you kind of set the stage for us and share for me kind of what that was like?
Of course. Yeah. So, little bit of backstory. I was getting my master's degree in social work, really trying to like plan everything out. My husband really wanted kids and I was like, no, I want to finish my degree. So I said, fine, we could start trying right before I started my second year.
Okay.
Thinking that if I got pregnant, I would have the babies right as I graduated. Mm-hmm. Everything's good, right? I have my degree, I'll start my hours, everything will be great. And I'll just have the baby that we wanted too.
Do it all, right? I mean, I feel like that's how so many of us start out, right? We're like, yeah, we can make this plan.
I can totally do it. Yeah. You have a baby, your life changes, but it's great. It's just like an easy, wonderful addition. And it's like your love just grows and everything's beautiful and happy with the baby.
Yeah.
So that didn't work out. I mean, everything's great, but it did not play out in the way that I had anticipated. So,
and isn't that
that's
common theme
for today? It doesn't play out. So I found out that I was pregnant.
Okay.
A week after we found out that my husband was getting mobilized to be deployed to Iraq.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So he was in the Army Reserves. He's a firefighter on the civilian side, but in the Army Reserves. And this was during all of that. And he got a call saying that he was getting transferred to a unit in New York. And for 2 days, we were like, oh, thank God it's not Iraq. You're just going to New York. I can still come visit, like no big deal.
Yeah.
And then after a couple of days, we found out, no, he's getting transferred to the new unit in New York that is getting deployed to Iraq.
Oh my goodness.
So we found that out. I was at dinner with him at his dad's house. It's sort of like you're going to be leaving, come to dinner kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And on the way home, I was like, I am more tired than I have ever been in my entire life. And I had done finals in college. Like I had done I've been up for 36 to 48 hours before.
Yeah.
And I still had not felt as tired as I felt like that night.
And that's such a true thing. I want to just pause for a moment because I can absolutely relate to that. I felt like I said the same thing, when I was in undergrad. It was like, those late nights studying, you're like, oh, I'm so tired. This, the most tired I've ever been. And then you go to grad school and you're like, oh no, I didn't know what I was talking about. And then like you said, you add kids and you add pregnancy and that tiredness. It is just something that's so difficult to communicate to someone like what it's like. It is absolutely. So I feel
like
you.
To your core, to your bones, just so exhausted. So so we found out that night that I was pregnant, which was not the story that I wanted. This happy, like we're pregnant, yay! We were happy, but it was also incredibly bittersweet because we knew that in a week he would be leaving.
What was going through your mind?
That I hope he comes back.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly scary.
Yeah, that was it. But it was also that I didn't. It was the setup for like all of my parenting, basically, which is like the ability to hold two things at once. At least the two things.
Yeah.
Right.
Can you say more about that?
Yeah, 100%. I was overjoyed with happiness, but I was also terrified, but I was also sad. And I was also wanting to so be present outside of all of those feelings, because I thought this might be the last week that I have with my husband.
Yeah.
And I'm feeling all these things and I can't even enjoy being with him.
Gosh. And
so
I think,
a lot.
Yeah, it's absolutely, I mean, it sounds overwhelming. And I think you nailed it on the head, is that oftentimes when we encounter events, sometimes people kind of have that like, oh, it's just one emotion. And then, when another emotion comes in, they're like, oh no, I don't have time for that one. And you're absolutely right. Like, you can just be like a whole tornado of, a million different emotions, and that they all kind of are valid because they're probably trying to tell you something.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, yes. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So you get this news a week before. Oh my goodness. So tell me more, kind of, how does it go from there?
So then he leaves. I was living nearby his family, which I had become very close with. So I spent a lot of time with them, but I was also in grad school, driving an hour up to grad school. So I had a lot of time in the car.
Wow. Yeah.
We had moved.
Those are scary times.
Over that summer, we had moved down, farther away, but I was only going to school, I think 2 days out of the week. And, at my internship, like the other 3 days, which wasn't quite as far as going up to school. So anyway, so I was busy. But I was feeling a lot of cramping and pain.
Okay.
And I was certain that I was losing the baby.
Oh, wow.
I was able to go visit him before he shipped out in Indiana for just a couple days. So it was after I had been to visit him that I came back, and I was just feeling a lot of sensations. And I would call and they would say, it's normal to have some cramping and everything, it's fine. Just wait till your next appointment.
Okay.
Another lesson for like the beginning of many lessons, that you really need to stand up for yourself.
I've heard several parents now say that exact same thing. And I would love to know kind of your perspective on why that is so important, and maybe what for you was kind of your barrier, your struggle for, as you mentioned, kind of standing up for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like this could be a whole other like hour and a half podcast because I am a doula. And so I do, like, in that medical space, there's a lot of work that I do with my clients to empower them to speak up for themselves.
Okay.
And I think it's interesting because my husband's a firefighter, so I hear a lot of his stories from like the medical side, like from that perspective.
Yeah.
People get burned out. People say things a lot of times, and there's nothing to back it up, right? Like people will say, like, my pain is at a 10 right now, but they're saying it like that. And he says to people, just so you know, if your pain was at a 10, like you would be screaming, like, so do you want to adjust your pain scale, kind of thing? So I understand where the medical side is coming from.
Yeah.
At the same time, even more so, that's why we need to speak up for ourselves. The medical space or whatever, because only we know our bodies, and only we know our experience. And whether everybody else in the room has had that experience and they're having a different reaction doesn't make a difference to you. It's your reaction, and it's your body, and it's your feelings, and they deserve to be heard.
Yeah.
And so I kept calling.
Okay.
Because I was like, I am not comfortable.
Yeah.
I do not feel like, I feel like something is wrong. And I really need to come in.
Yeah.
And they finally said, okay, fine, you can come in.
Wow. And that's so hard, especially as a first-time parent.
And I finally explained to them when I got in, I said, look, my husband's deployed right now.
Yeah.
I am alone in this, and I am having all of these thoughts, and I just really need somebody to reassure me, or not, of what's going on. But I really just need to check in and figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
And that was the one appointment that I went to, because it was last minute, that my mother-in-law did not come with me on. So, so she does the ultrasound. I ended up switching practices as a side note, but in hindsight, I'm like, where was she looking? Because anybody who's been pregnant knows that when you are that early, you look down here on an ultrasound. she was looking up here. I don't know if it was her first day, her first hour. Like, I don't know what was going on there.
Okay.
But anyway, so she said, I can't find a heartbeat. Of course, that's my worst nightmare.
Yes.
So I am like, okay, all right, like this is happening. She said, don't give up hope. We're going to do an intravaginal ultrasound just to make sure, just so I can see. Okay. So we go in and the picture comes up, and I remember thinking, there's a lot going on in that picture. And she said, oh my.
Oh, to have those words come out of the person looking inside of you. Oh my.
Oh my.
What?
And I said, is there something wrong?
Yeah.
And she said, oh no, there's nothing wrong. There's just 2 of them.
Oh, wow.
So that's how I found out I was having twins.
After the oh my.
After the oh my, and the insistence that I be seen.
Yes.
Obviously, I would have found out eventually, right? But the earlier, the better when you find out about those things.
Yeah. That's big news. It's big news to kind of, you're pregnant. Big news. There's more than one.
There's more than one of them there.
Yeah.
And they explained to me that it made a lot of sense. And they then validated my experience.
Wow.
Makes a lot of sense that you were feeling so much pain, because this is your first pregnancy, and with twins, everything grows doubly.
Yeah.
So everything that should be expanding a little bit slowly is going faster, and everything's happening faster and more. And so it makes sense that you're feeling a lot of cramping.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thanks. That's what I've been saying.
Thanks for finally listening to me.
Okay. Can I put this guy in now? Or wait till he's cooked a little bit more?
I would wait till it's like, yeah, no, you can put it in.
Okay.
But I would maybe put in like half of all of that.
Sounds good. I can do that.
Because once it's cooked, I kind of like to break the broccoli up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
So I found out that it was twins.
Okay.
And I will never forget. I forget a lot of things now that I have 5 kids and I'm getting older. But I will never forget, it was on a Tuesday that I found out.
Oh, wow.
And I was not able to tell my husband that we were expecting 2 children until Friday.
Wow. So, I mean, holding all of that news and just that experience, I imagine, can be just so, I mean, to use the word again, overwhelming. Yeah.
Yeah. It was very overwhelming. I like to say that I was naive enough to be really excited.
Tell me more about that one.
Well, it was just, after they came was not easy at all.
Okay.
And so I, had I had, a child already or something, I would have been a little bit more frightened than I was. But
gotcha.
Because, it was my first rodeo at that point, I didn't know.
Okay.
I mean, I was a little scared, but I would have been a lot more scared had I really known.
Okay, so walk me through kind of, now you're at that process, you've got twins, like you said, kind of everything's moving twice as fast. And again, you're doing this without your parent partner there. So what was that experience like? I understand, it's kind of at that time, kind of all you knew.
Right.
But I imagine that that's such a tough journey to do.
There was a lot of just like, this is just what it is.
Okay.
I tried really hard not to think about whether he was in danger. Just like we were emailing back and forth. That was our primary mode of communication.
Okay.
There was a phone with the unit, but it was only, he could only use it like once a week or so.
Got it. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I was just kind of like trying to put him out of my mind. Luckily, I did have my grad school and my internship that kept me pretty busy.
Okay.
They were very supportive. They gave me a baby shower.
Your grad program did? Okay.
Yeah, I still have pictures of like us sitting in a classroom and like they had us play all these games and yeah, they were very, very supportive. And then my family was very supportive. My mom came out to visit. She was living in Virginia at the time. Came out to visit multiple times. I really felt a sense of community come around me.
Wow.
Which was very helpful.
Yeah. And I imagine, I've heard from other families where they don't necessarily always have some of that community.
Yeah.
And so that is, wow, just so awesome that you were able to find some of those people and that those people were able and willing to show up for you in that way, it sounds like.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I think that set the stage for me always finding a community.
Okay.
And like, no, because we moved a couple times and I've just always sought out my group. You need your group.
Yeah. How have
your
you
people?
When you moved to these places, was it kind of coming naturally to you, or were there specific like tips, tricks that you had? Because I hear that all the time. Like it's so hard as grown-ups to make friends,
people.
And to find your people.
Yeah. So I was very much into the attachment parenting world.
Okay.
So I found that initially through like a very random connection. But she was somebody that was really there for me after the twins were born.
Wow.
And I was adamant that I would try to nurse them, even though a doctor told me it was impossible. Literally, a pediatrician told me that I should not even try because there was no way that I would be able to keep up with their needs. Wow. And I just shouldn't even try. Just kind of resign yourself to the fact that you're just going to give them.
I mean, I can appreciate, maybe their intent was to alleviate some of that pressure.
Right. I mean, they knew my situation, right?
Yeah.
They knew that my husband wasn't going to be there, but I said, this is something I really want to do.
Yeah. To kind of just be like, oh, here's something I really want to do. Nah.
Don't do that.
Yeah. I mean, again, talking about that invalidation of what your thoughts, your feelings, your plan or the ideas that maybe you have in your head. And then, yes, if it doesn't necessarily pan out in the way you're, wanting to kind of, flexibility. That's definitely something I think we need as parents.
Yeah.
But at the
altering
same time,
of expectations, right? That's a big thing. But it's also really important to trust your intuition, which I did over and over again.
Yeah.
Through many situations. And that I have never been steered wrong by feeling like I did what I felt in my heart was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I really fought for that.
And I think that's so important to hear, especially for anybody out there who's maybe struggling with just that, like trusting your gut and kind of, because our brains are really good at telling us all the ways that it's going to maybe not work out or fail. And so it can be really easy to get stuck in that. And so to kind of hear you say that, at least in your experience firsthand, trusting your gut has really kind of been an asset to you, it sounds like. Yeah.
And I feel like it is definitely important to recognize that there's the anxiety parts of us that serve us well, but also can sometimes tell us things that aren't true.
Yeah.
And there's our intuition part. And there is some crossover there sometimes, but trying to have spaces where we're quiet, where we can really just kind of like try and go in and figure out like what is my gut telling me outside of the fear and outside of the big thing of the other people's expectations. What is it that I want? What do I feel is best for me and my family in this situation?
Did you find that was kind of most helpful for you in being able to navigate, like you said, and tease out which were kind of the anxiety speaking to me right now, which were the intuition, kind of the gut?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I would really go back to my community a lot.
Okay.
Once I found that, my good friends, like I would end up talking with my good friends, like, this is what I feel. What do you think? Like really finding those people that you can trust, that you can have those conversations with, to have that back and forth and just have like that sounding board.
Okay.
Is really important.
Yeah.
But so that one friend was huge support to me. I said, no, I want to nurse. And she said, you can do it. And she got me the name of a lactation consultant that ended up talking to me so often for free.
Wow.
I never even met her, but I would leave her messages and she would call me back like right away. She talked to me through all the things. My friend would come over and make me dinner. She would bring her kids over and just sit with me. I would take my kids over there and I would lay in her bed and take naps. I mean, just like that kind of community that made me feel supported, even though I didn't have my partner there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, for, if you're a parent supporter out there, I think that that's such valuable information of ways to be able to show up for these people in your life in a capacity that maybe they actually could really appreciate and need, versus, like you said, maybe some of those people that are coming in thinking they know better. So I'm going to do the things that, I think I should be doing, which it sounds like in your experience, it was, what do you need and how can I kind of help you in that way?
Right.
Yeah.
And I talk with my postpartum clients a lot about that. Even my birth doula clients, like, whatever you think you may need, be ready for it to change. First of all.
Yeah.
Because once you have that baby, everything blows up.
Right.
It blows up. And you're like, what, who am I? What is going on? What is my life now?
Yeah.
And be ready to be really honest and set really good boundaries about what is going to be helpful. Even if that means you're going to piss people off.
Yeah.
It's fine. They get to be pissed off. You get to have what you need.
Yeah. And that's such a good reminder, folks, that, they are totally entitled to feeling pissed off. That's fine. Yeah. That's their own emotions.
Right.
At the same time, exactly, you're not responsible. You don't need to feel that pressure of taking that on.
Right.
And then kind of, essentially, as I say, like, manage other people's emotions. You've got your own stuff, and now you've got new babies. You've got your hands full. You don't necessarily need to take on kind of all that external stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll never forget my mother-in-law, who I adored and has passed. We had a lot of conversations as my kids got older, and she expressed to me how I raised my kids so differently than she did, but she had so much respect for how I had done it.
Wow.
And we really came to that together, because, like, I'll never forget, she said at one point, the twins, it was wild. I didn't put them on a schedule. I had to nurse them on demand because I really wanted to nurse them. That meant I had to just nurse on demand.
Yeah.
So I had put somebody down for a nap, and then somebody else a little bit later, and somebody woke up and they started crying. And I was like, oh, I can't believe I have to go get this baby.
Yeah.
And she said, you can let them cry. And I said, I don't want to. I don't want to let them cry. I know that people do. I don't want to. And she said, at some point, you're going to have to let them cry. Oh, I'm not. I'm not.
Wow.
And she kind of was like, okay, let's see how that goes.
Yeah.
But like I said, we really came to an understanding. I did things differently, and that was okay.
Yeah.
And it was okay that she did things differently. I respect how she did it.
Yeah.
But I needed to do it how I felt like I wanted to.
Yeah.
And what felt right to me.
Was that kind of, as you moved, and maybe as you mentioned, kind of her telling you, hey, I respect kind of that you did things differently, and you were able to kind of stick to your guns in that way. Was that validating? Was that, what was going on for you in that moment? Because I imagine that that many of our parents are experiencing. I think there's so much of that new wave of parents nowadays kind of looking at it and saying, just because that's how it's always been done doesn't mean that's how I have to do it, or how I want to do it. And they're stepping outside of the box, and that can be really scary.
Terrifying.
Yeah. And so, to then have someone who maybe is from that group that we're telling you kind of, I don't know if this is appropriate, to kind of then have them come back and say, okay, I get it. I see you.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was your experience when you heard that?
I think it just validated for me, like me listening to what I felt was right for me. And I think that's the big kind of like aha for me a lot of times, is that, like, if you're doing what you feel like in your gut is really the right thing, then you're going to feel more confident about what's going on. Yeah. And that confidence will be portrayed to your children. And that confidence will be portrayed to the people around you. Yeah. If you're okay with your kid tantruming in the middle of Target because you don't want to do what everybody else thinks that you should do, but you feel confident that this is the right route, then people are going to just kind of be like, oh, well, she looks like she got it. you know?
Yeah.
Versus you standing there and being like, oh my God, like even if you're doing that internally.
Mm-hmm. Right? Absolutely.
There's a sense of like confidence and surety that comes with following your gut that I feel like eases everybody through the process.
Yeah.
So it's not, and I'm not saying that like everybody should do it how I did it, but just like when you're following what you feel is right for you, then I feel like things will flow and feel more comfortable for everybody. You're like that, like confident leader.
And it sounds like for you kind of being able to do that, like you said, trust yourself, that it was coming from a place of figuring out what your values were and really kind of doing that value-driven life and kind of plan, if you will, and finding the confidence in that to be able to stand on your 2 feet despite kind of all the naysayers,
right?
And say, hey, you know, I'm gonna give this a try, and I'm gonna give it a try because it aligns with the things that are super important to me, super valuable as far as like my morals, my beliefs, etc.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's actually not to like plug the business, but that is something that I really want for the parents that I work with, and something that we talk about is being intentional.
Okay.
And like kind of setting your values and imagining what you want for your child in 20 years because you're growing a person. Yeah. You know, you're building a human. You're not like, you are managing day-to-day behaviors of a wild toddler, but the way in which you do that is going to form the person that they are in 15 years. Yeah. And so having that like bigger picture in mind about like what kind of person you're trying to raise, working backward from that will help inform you how you handle those daily, day-to-day struggles with the kids. And I think because of the community that I was in and my education, and I just read a bunch, like I just became very clear on what those were early on.
And so I'm curious, kind of going back to bringing these babies into the world kind of on your own, did you have all of that already kind of formulated?
Oh, no.
Okay.
No.
I mean, so walk me through that beginning process. I mean, even just the fact of like giving birth kind of without your parent partner there. And then now, like you said, kind of here are these people that, you know, humans that you're planning on growing. Like you said, you're looking at that future going, I want them to kind of be thriving and successful and whatever that looks like for them. Walk me through that process. What was going on for you in those moments of doing that and doing that solo in that sense?
It seems to be the theme of the thing, but it was incredibly overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because, you know, my values and what I wanted for them at that point, it was really difficult. Like I really wanted to nurse them. I didn't want to force them into a schedule. I felt like, you know, they were also little, not super little, but little enough that I couldn't put them on a schedule yet. They needed to be fed as much as they would eat. Okay. It was incredibly hard and I hated it.
Tell me more about that kind of idea.
Like I said earlier, like, you know, I tell new moms, like it's going to be an explosion after you have this baby. Like whatever you think you may feel, like don't count on that. And it's okay if you are really, really excited to have this baby. And once the baby comes, you're like, what F did I do? Yeah. That's okay. Doesn't mean you're a bad mom. It doesn't mean you shouldn't have done it. We're holding both things. Yeah. Right? You're excited to have a new baby and you're like, holy crap, I just blew up my life. What did I do? Yeah. And I think that's really important to say and normalize, because that happens not to everybody. Yeah. But it does happen to enough people that they think that they're bad or wrong or like, oh my God, I shouldn't have been a mom. Yeah. Because I'm feeling this way. And that's not true.
Absolutely. And I think you hit it right on the head, that normalizing it, because that parent guilt can be really toxic, to kind of use a buzzword. But it's so true, because like you said, sometimes you may look at it, and there were days, I can say even just for my own self, you know, that I was like, what did I do? Was this a mistake? Kind of, I'm not enjoying this.
No.
When you see it, you're like, oh, having a baby, it's so amazing and beautiful experience. Like, yes. And then, so then when you're feeling anything but that, like you said, it can feel incredibly lonely to sit in that and feel like, well, what's wrong with me as a person?
Right.
It must be me.
Right. I wanted this.
Yeah.
I asked for this, and here they are, and I hate them.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one of the baby showers, and I got so many matching outfits, and I remember like holding the outfits and just being like, oh my God, it's gonna be so amazing when they come and they're just sitting there and
they're
matching. And I would say probably 2 weeks after I had them, my mom was living with me. My dad had come out to also stay with me and help.
Okay.
And I was super sleep deprived.
Yes.
Just like, my husband's not here, like this just explosion, right? Like my life has just been turned upside down and I'm not happy about it.
Yeah.
And I was just crying to my parents, and I looked at them, and my mom said something to the effect of like, well, you couldn't have carried them for your whole life. Kind of trying to joke around, like, like they couldn't have been inside forever. They had to come out eventually. And I looked at her and I said, put them back.
Yes.
But not joking. If you can put them back, I will live with them in my stomach forever.
Yes.
I don't care. I just don't want to be where I am doing what I'm doing. I'm miserable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a real, again, called The Real Family Eats People, because we're talking about real stuff. And I totally can appreciate that. I remember, similar, my second kid, I wanted him to cook for as long, like everyone's like, oh, aren't you ready for baby to come? No, like, please stay in there as long as you can, because I'm not ready.
Yeah.
I'm not, no, and like you said, I swear I've not only myself, but I've heard that from other folks where there are times where you're like, please just put them back.
Put them back.
I don't.
Yeah.
No.
Right.
I unsubscribe from this.
Right.
Done.
How do I get out of this?
Exactly.
And not to say that I didn't love them or enjoy moments with them.
Yeah.
But there was a real like resentment and regret and grief.
Yeah.
I find that so often lately. Like, I'm reflecting on how much grief comes with parenting.
Can you say more about that? Because I think that's so important.
I'm going to start crying.
Hey, tears are real. This is
real. Just, I grieved my life before. I wanted it. This is what I wanted, but everything changes and nothing is ever going to be the same after you have those babies. And I grieved that heavily. Yeah. I was getting my master's because I was going to be a social worker. And after the kids came, I didn't want to work. And I was privileged enough to be able to do that. But it was a constant struggle of like, wait, I picked this, right? I picked not to go to work because I feel completely worthless in this job of staying home with these two things that just take.
Yeah.
And I resented and grieved that I didn't have this academic and like meaningful social worker life that I had imagined myself having. Like, my husband and I joked around about it because when we first got together, he said, I'm not going to be a millionaire or anything, but like, I could make it work if you didn't work.
Well,
you don't have to work if you don't want to. And I looked at it like, it actually was almost the start of an argument because I was like, don't you know me? Like, I'm applying to master's programs. I'm getting my master's. I'm working. I want to work.
Yeah.
Why would you say that to me? And then it just got completely flipped on its head when those babies came out.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the hell? This whole time I thought this was who I was going to be. So I was grieving that. Just like so much.
Yeah.
And at every stage it hits. I grieve not having babies. I grieve not nursing.
Yeah.
my oldest ones went to college this past year, and that was like,
oh my goodness.
Oh God, it was like, just tear my heart out of my chest.
Absolutely.
Incredible grief.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you being willing to be real with us, that grief is absolutely a part of that. And like you said, in so many different ways, like you said, changing maybe some of your past. I think that many of us parents, we sit there as kids kind of drawing in our notebooks or, kind of dreaming, what's it going to be like? And sometimes it doesn't always pan out, more often than not.
Right?
It doesn't always pan out in those exact ways. And that there is those feelings of grief. I've worked with folks who sometimes even have the grief of like ones that are all one gender, that kind of comes out, and kind of the grief of not having a girl or not having a boy, or whatnot. Or for some, I've talked to a family a couple of episodes ago that where it was a grief of then a diagnosis that's kind of issued, and again, it's not necessarily following what you had, or like you said, even that milestone of becoming those empty nesters. Like, that's a very real thing, because like you said, now you're sending this heart outside of you away and hoping and praying that they're prepared and that they're doing stuff. And gosh, that's so hard. And I appreciate kind of your willingness to normalize that happens. Absolutely. And it doesn't make you any less of a parent.
Right.
In fact, it makes you a real parent in that sense. Like, that's very real stuff. Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm so curious, like, with all these things that you've learned, was there at any moment kind of like a aha moment for you where it was able to kind of click, like you said, to be able to kind of hold that space for the grief, hold the space for the joy as well, and that having those things be possible at the same time? Still working on it?
Yeah, well, I think that's, I don't think we're ever done.
Yeah.
I don't think it's like ever like, I figured that out.
Mastered.
No, because there's always a new kid. There's always a new stage. There's always a new personality, a hurdle. I mean, there's so much that has come up that I just feel like everything is like just a reminder, you're not in control. You know that, right?
Yeah.
You know that, right?
Putting you in your place.
You think you have control? Here you go.
Yeah.
Here, let this happen. Just a reminder.
Yeah.
And I think that, if anything, the aha moment is like, I'm not in control. And and it's never done.
Yeah.
I'm not in control of this whole process. They're going to go out and, live their lives, and I'm not in control of that. And they're going to come to me with things still. And I'm still going to have to hold all of these emotions of grief and love and sadness and joy. And it's never going to end.
Yeah. Is that scary? I mean, just that thought of it's never going to end.
I think where I've gotten to now is the acceptance of those things. The realization, the acceptance that this is the journey.
Yeah.
It's never the same again. It's just going to keep growing and changing, and I just have to keep changing and growing with it.
Yeah.
It's really the only option.
And it sounds like, kind of going back to something you said earlier, finding those ways to stay present in that moment, to be able to say, it is what it is. These are things, like you said, that are out of my control. What are the things that I can control? And some of that is our perspective. Some of that is your work to be able to stay present and say, you know what, I'm going to do my darndest to be able to show up, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and kind of be there. Yeah. That's, gosh, an incredible story, an incredible journey. I mean, looking back now, I know you've got tons of research kind of on your or resources rather on your website that you offer, but is there anything else that you found kind of along the lines that would be helpful for any of our parents that maybe are in a similar situation as you have been?
I think just reaching out and trying to find your community, whatever that looks like. find something that interests you and then connect with people who that also interests them, parenting related or not.
Okay.
For my thing, a lot of it ended up being attachment parenting, but I crochet and I knit. And there was a period of time where I was going to a knitting store up in Murrieta, and it was like once a week I would sit with ladies that were probably like 40 years my senior.
Okay.
And it was like my favorite part of the week.
Wow.
Because I heard them talking about their kids, and I heard them they were at a different phase and they were okay.
Yeah.
So
it's like light at the end of the tunnel.
Perspective. Yeah. Just like anything that just feeds your cup and feeds your soul.
Yeah.
To just help you get back to those values and just to keep kind of like pulling you back to wherever your center is so that you can be there and try and be present.
And it sounds like being able to also maybe give yourself the okay to invest in yourself, that it doesn't always have to be kind of kid.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's so easy to lose yourself. And I have lost myself multiple times after multiple pregnancies. But you just have to work to, find yourself again.
Yeah.
In different activities. And even like I, see posts on Facebook sometimes like, I'm so introverted and I definitely have an extroverted side to me. So I feel for that person who feels like, God, it's like agony to reach out to somebody. Like, I get it, but find like a group of introverts.
Yeah.
Find people who enjoy movies, like go to the movies together or something. So you don't have to like talk a lot, or just find something to connect with online, in person, like anything. Just find a way to connect with other people, because that human connection is what really like drives your ability to like just keep going.
Yeah, and it's so needed. We are not meant to survive in parenting alone.
Oh no.
I think there would be a lot lower population if we tried to do that.
I know. Yeah. Yes.
All right. So am I good? Is there anything else? So I've mixed it all up. It looks pretty well cooked.
Yeah. I think that looks great.
Okay.
And then you add like on the top a little bit of feta.
Okay. Perfect. And then I just serve it that way?
Salt. You just serve it that way, like in a big like goulashy.
Love it.
Blob.
Okay. Well, this looks and it smells yummy. So thank you so much for being willing to. Do I mix it in or just leave it on top?
I kind of like to leave it on top.
Okay, I can do that.
I don't know. Somehow the kids always liked it, and if you mix it in, sometimes it like melts a little bit. You can't see it as much.
Okay, so we want to let them know that
there's something else in there. It's not just the goulash.
I can appreciate that. Well, thank you so much for being willing to share this recipe with us and our listeners, and also being willing to share part of your story and really helping with that cause of pulling back that curtain, normalizing, like you said, kind of all of these difficulties that come up with parenting that we don't talk about enough, in my opinion.
Sure.
And it's really doing us a disservice.
100%. Yes.
Yeah. So thank you so much for being willing to do this today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yes. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next time. If you or anyone that you know is struggling with any of the topics that we discussed in today's episode, make sure to check out our show notes for support and resources. You can get help. Thanks again for joining us on today's episode of The Real Family Eats. If you're a parent ready to share your real life parenting story, make sure to reach out to us in our website found in the show notes. And that goes for today's recipe, social medias, support, and resources. All of that can be found in our show notes. So make sure to check them out. And make sure to follow, like, share, subscribe, and stay up to date on all things The Real Family Eats. I hope you'll join us next time for more food for thought and thoughtful food. Enjoy your eats.